Okay, so the 7.4 section is really just an overview of 7.1 through 7.3. So you're not learning any new material here. This is just a good place for you to kind of take a look at it, the strategies that we use to factor, and maybe give you like a little step by step on how to factor whenever you're like, oh gosh, where do I start? So anyways, let's get started with this lesson. It's very short. Okay, so rather than read this to you, just know that if I ever go too fast or hit the next page too fast, you can hit pause. All right, so whenever we look at something like this, the very first thing that you should ask yourself is, do they have something in common that we can factor out? Okay, and since they are both even, you should ask yourself, could we factor out a 4 possibly? And 98 is not divisible by 4. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it looks like we can only factor out a 2. So I'm going to factor out 2, and they both have, each term has at least one w, so I'm going to factor out a w. Now, what times 2w would give you 32w cubed? And that is 16w squared. And what times 2w would give you a negative 98w? And that is a negative 49. Now, the next thing that you should do is you should ask yourself, can I factor what's left? Can I factor that stuff inside the parentheses? And if you take a look at it, it is a difference of squares. And we talked about that when you factor a difference of squares, you always get a conjugate pair. So this 2w is going to follow us to the end. 16w squared minus 49 always factors to be the conjugate pair of the square root of this and the square root of this, and one's a plus and one's a minus. So those are your conjugate pairs. So this thing does factor to be that. Now, can you check your work? Absolutely. So let's go ahead and multiply this back out. 2w times 4w plus 7, 4w minus 7. So first thing I would do is I would distribute the 2w to that. 2w times 4w is 8w squared. 2w times 7 is 14w times 4w minus 7. So now I'm going to use the distributive property again. 8w squared times 4w is 32w cubed. 8w squared times negative 7 is negative 56w. Now I've got 14w times 4 is, let's look here, 56w. And then 14w times negative 7 is 98w. Negative 98w, sorry. Okay, so now combine your like terms. Those are opposites, so they cancel each other. So I'm left with 32w cubed minus 98w. And since that's what I had to begin with, I know that this is the correct factored form. Okay, so whenever you look at something like this, ask yourself, do all 4 terms have anything in common? And I'm going to have to say no here, because I know that 27 is odd, so 2 cannot be pulled out of there. And since 3 can't go into 8, I know that I can't pull that out. So it's also not divisible by 6 or 4. So I'm just going to have to factor this the way that it is. So anytime you see 4 terms, underline the first 2, underline the last 2, and then factor them in pairs. So what can I pull out of 12x cubed minus 8x squared? They both have at least a 4x squared. What times 4x squared would give you 12x cubed? 3x. What times 4x squared would give you a negative 8x squared? Now remember I said whenever that's a minus you bring down a minus, when that's a plus you bring down a plus? So what's the biggest number that you can factor out of 27x plus 18? That number is 9. What times negative 9 would give you a negative 27x? 3x. What times negative 9 would give you a positive 18? Okay, and if this right here doesn't match this right here, it's either A, not factorable, or B, you did something wrong. But since they match, you can now factor out the 3x minus 2, and what you're left with is this, 4x squared minus 9. Now, do you see anything else that could be factored? Well, this right here is a difference of squares. So you've got 3x minus 2, and then a difference of squares always factors to b. Take the square root of that, take the square root of that, put that in both places. One's a plus, one's a minus. So now it's completely factored. Okay, so this is the end of the lesson. What you really have to do is you have to do your homework. Please do your homework. If you have any questions, make sure you send me messages. Again, I'm only gone for a short amount of time, but I can respond to you. So go ahead and send me messages if you have questions, and I'll be happy to help you guys out. But again, can't help you if you don't ask. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.